Welcome to another political commentary slash update video. I'm Thersites the Historian. With me is Sean Chick. We're going to make some Tuesday predictions. Today is another important election day. We'll talk about the state of the race, but we'll begin by talking about one Senator Elizabeth Warren, someone who is something of an enigma at this point. We don't really know exactly why she's doing what she's doing, but it certainly has caused some controversy, especially on the left. What are your thoughts on Elizabeth Warren, Sean?
That's got quite a few here. I was really thinking back to when she accused Sanders of telling her that a woman could not beat Trump. And I mentioned that one because at that moment I was like, oh my God, like these people are actually going to now have a very public split. Because before that, they were so like I gotta say this, like they were they really didn't go after each other because they were essentially hoping that one or the other would be able to pick up the slack. Like if one of them started to have a downturn, their supporters would shift to the other one. That's what they were hoping for.
Yeah.
And by that time, Warren had lost her frontrunner status. And I mention that one in particular because I know she's going around right now saying it's sexism. I'm not here to tell you sexism doesn't exist. I'm not here to tell you that sexism didn't prevent people from supporting her, because it definitely did. But I think the support she had, she lost, not because of sexism, but because of bad political instincts, which I could go on and on about, mistakes with Medicare for all. And, she doesn't, while I wouldn't say, I mean, she's not as much a liar as Trump and Biden. Her relationship to the truth is more shaky than some of the other people that were on stage.
Yeah,
So that's general.
I don't disagree with any of that. I guess I've been thinking about the last few days, and it occurs to me that the reason for her not endorsing Bernie must have some personal aspect to it. So why would she hate Bernie so much? It has to be something simple. I think that this beef is more about status. Warren thinks that she has a kind of seniority to Bernie because back in 2015 there was the draft Warren movement. So she thought that when she announced that she was interested in 2020 that he would step aside and let her take her rightful place in the sun. When he didn't do so, and when he expressed some misgivings either about her chances or maybe like you're saying about the need for two progressives in case one falters, I think she took that very personally. And then I think that there's also a sort of Harvard elitism angle as well. Bernie does not have an Ivy League PhD. Warren does. And I think she comes from a professional class background where she thinks that it is his duty to bow to her because she has the superior credentials. She also seems to think that her plans are superior, even though they mostly aren't. So I think that there is a lot of stuff going on there that she's trying to categorize as sexist or categorize as a gender issue, when in reality it's more of a personal issue and she feels aggrieved because she lost to someone she regards as an inferior.
Yes, I mean it's also hard to take responsibility, right? Much easier to blame it on something else.
Yeah, I mean, like
Um,
Hillary Clinton decided to go the extra mile and bring in an entire country and blame everything on Russia. Warren is just blaming everything on Bernie Bros online, saying mean things about her.
yeah, I think it really might be the core of it. She was the front runner for about a month, month and a half. The people over at 538 were like, Warren is everybody's most popular number two pick. So going to late summer, roughly early fall, the people at 538 were essentially signaling to people that, hey, Warren's going to get this.
Yeah,
That's what they were signaling in many ways. And she screwed it up.
yeah,
And when you screw up that bad, I mean, seriously, like think of all those Civil War generals who wrote memoirs. How many of them actually wrote a memoir where they said it was my fault? Almost never. I
yeah,
just add real quick, a little historical aside. That's why when Robert E. Lee said that Gettysburg was his fault, it's pretty shocking. Generals don't do that. Why would a senator from Massachusetts do that either? It's not human nature. If you can blame it on somebody or something else, you'll do it 9 times out of 10.
yeah. I think I agree. The other thing about the whole second choice thing is that, to use another historical analogy, Themistocles, after the Battle of Salamis, was voted the second most valorous Greek by every other ship captain who got the vote. And that got him no reward. He didn't win the award because second choice doesn't count for shit when there's only one real vote. Um,
Warren, though, also I must note, doesn't think she can't necessarily endorse Biden right away. If she does that, she knows it'll ruin her credentials because her supporters do tend to be more intelligent, more policy focused. They're going to know that her support for him is a sham. So she's going to do what she did during 2015 and 16. She's essentially just going to sit it out.
yeah,
She,
I mean, I
she
know.
only begrudgingly eventually endorsed Clinton. She mostly just sat the whole thing out.
Yeah, I know with
And I gotta be honest, that's when I first started to doubt her because I was like, you have a guy up there who's putting forth the kind of policies you say that you support, and you're not with him. And I get it, the Clinton machine is powerful, but that was when I was first like, oh, I don't know about this. And then, other things that have happened since then. But it's really sad, you know. I'm mostly still kind of like Warren, but not lately.
yeah, I think I like the idea of Warren better than Warren. Because I think of her kind of like as a second coming of a Teddy Roosevelt style politician, someone who is reform minded. Now, that's not my ideal. I'd prefer more of an FDR style person like a Bernie Sanders, but when compared to most of the alternatives like Joe Biden, who wants to basically load his cabinet down with fucking Jamie Dimon and Mike Bloomberg, I have to look at, Warren's TR style rhetoric and think, you know what? That is a world of difference from what Joe Biden is talking about.
Well, do you want to move on then to Sanders or do some more Warren? Or do you move to
Um,
Biden?
I don't really have anything else to say about Warren, really. I think between us, we covered everything I have written here.
Yeah,
The only other thing I would add would be that, she talks about sexism, and sure, it probably cost her some votes, but can you think of a candidate who doesn't have something about them that didn't lose them votes, something beyond their control? I mean, Pete being gay was a disadvantage to some voters. Bernie's age is a barrier.
yeah.
Um,
The thing is
Biden's
that
Biden's long Washington tenure, that's a barrier to some people. I mean, every one of these candidates has some barrier. So rather than bitching about it, I think she just needs to get the fuck over it and figure out how to overcome whatever disadvantages she has.
these are all true. You're just very much in a moment where the sexism, at least for the identity politics crowd, is arguably the number one issue for them. I'd say even more than race, honestly.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's also
so
I also just final thought here on that. I don't think she can actually endorse Biden on this cycle just because a lot of her supporters, at least most of the prominent ones, have already gone over to Bernie, including people who are identity first, and they've done so begrudgingly, but clearly. Whereas
yeah,
the people who are more like family issues focused have gone over to Bernie and didn't really have much of a problem doing so. So at this point, if she were to endorse Biden, all of her followers would already be in the Bernie camp, and they would say, "What the fuck?"
yeah, and it really. I mean, she may have some bad political instincts, but she's not stupid enough to go with Biden just yet. She'd endorse him when it's inevitable.
Yeah, I
You
agree.
yeah. So you want to talk about Sanders perhaps for a bit?
Yeah. So, speaking of 538 odds earlier, they now project Biden has a 14 out of 15 chance of clinching a majority. I call bullshit.
You
But
do?
yes,
All right.
Biden will have to go through at least a few debates. And if he has to reduce his stump speech now to 7 minutes to avoid fucking it up, can you imagine him debating for 2 hours or 3 hours in a one on one, even with someone who is as gentle and kindly as Bernie Sanders, without stepping all in it over and over and over and making major gaffes or getting really irrationally angry at some moderator? I can't imagine that. I mean, the dementia is going to be on full display. He might win a plurality, but there's no way he gets a majority.
This is possible. I think you've got a good point about the debates, but hear me out on this one. These Democratic debates have increasingly had low viewership. There is a feeling out there amongst people that Biden already has us in a bag. that Bernie, and if anything, especially if they're going to look at tonight, they understand Bernie has to trust tonight. But if you still got Sanders going for another 2 or 3 weeks, there's a lot of people who are going to think that he's just dragging this out and being an asshole. That's what they're going to think. And a lot of people aren't going to watch those debates. And there are already people in the media. I mean, I read an Intercept article about this. They're already starting to completely ignore his cognitive failures because the way they see it is blue no matter who. He's our man. We've got to beat Trump, and he's the guy who's going to do it. The choice has been made. So if you ask me, it's not going to be as big an effect because they're just not going to talk about it on CNN and MSNBC and all those other places.
Well,
They're already lined up.
see, I actually think what'll happen is that regardless of which one of them gets the plurality, but it would be easier for them if Bernie gets it because I don't think they have much trouble screwing him. What will happen in a convention is that the plan will be to let the progressives broker the convention and then find someone to replace Biden. I don't think they'll actually run Biden in the general because there's no way they would run someone with that advanced a state of dementia.
Well,
So I think the convention is going to be one big televised taking the keys away from Grandpa moment.
fascinating idea. I don't know. When I've mentioned the cognitive problems to people, what they're telling me is you don't think Trump doesn't have cognitive problems, which he does.
Yeah, he's got cognitive problems called being an idiot.
But
I
the
don't think
thing
he's got
about,
dementia. He's just really stupid.
but I also try to tell them what they don't understand about Trump as opposed to Biden. And Biden used to have this, by the way. He just doesn't. Trump's a showman. If he stumbles on his words, but he is theatrical and he kind of stumbles and gets where he's going. Biden just starts rambling very incoherently quite a bit. And I mean, I don't know, man. Maybe you're right about your idea. I think they'll run Biden no matter what. I think they're gonna throw everything they can for him. And I don't think the debates will have as much an effect unless we're talking like serious gaff land. But once again, you have to have the media willing to put that out there. I mean, Fox News will. Their people are just love watching Biden being unable to say the Declaration of Independence. You know?
Yeah, that was pretty damn bad. But the
Oh
other
yeah.
thing about Trump is, so I know some people who think that he's got dementia. They've been saying this since about 2016. What I've noticed though is that if you watch clips of him, the only times where he really goes off the deep end is when he's trying to describe something that's a little bit complicated or that requires some degree of abstract thought. So, for
Yes, you're
instance,
absolutely correct.
if he's just talking about like people he knows or his political opponents, he's always on point because he's just talking trash. That's what he does. If he has to describe something like why he supports clean coal, then he will make comments to make it clear that he has no clue what clean coal is or what it means. Like, I think this was a clip from a couple years ago. He was talking about workers in the clean coal fields, and he said that they clean the coal. And he did some motion with his hands that implies that he thinks they literally, like, scrub it to
Oh
clean
God.
it.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember that one.
yeah, so I mean,
That
that's the problem with Trump is that it's not so much that he's lost it, that he just never had it. There was never much going on between his ears.
I'll be honest though, man. You watch some old clips of him in the '90s. He is way more cognizant back then. He makes much more sense.
Well, what does he
You
talk
know?
about that has any complexity in any of his like Larry King interviews in the 80s or 90s? Not much.
Oh, he'll talk about trade, and actually, to be honest, he's been obsessed with trade since the 1980s. So if you really think about it, it's one of the only complex issues that he can still pull off. But that's because he's been talking about it forever. I mean, you just also saw an interview with him from like the early '90s where he's talking about the Japanese and our competition with Japan at the time and how the advantages they had with us at that time. So that's just something he's been obsessed with. You got a good point when it comes to coal. He wasn't exactly talking about coal in the 1990s. But no, man, like I just
Yeah.
you can see like a decline in the kind of words that he's used. Same thing with Biden, although the Biden one was really sharp.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
true.
we kind of woke up one day and we're like, "What the hell?"
Yeah, because I feel
Because
like with Trump, it could just be sort of a general mental decline from not using his brain enough. That's not necessarily a disease. With
yeah,
Biden, clearly there's some rot and
yeah.
significant amounts of it too.
I mean, they could put Grandpa to bed, as you're saying. I do not think they'll do it because they're that's there's a term for it, but I'm going to use my historical term. It's like Vietnam, right? Like once you're in deep, you just keep going because you lost all these men, right? So if you give up now, it's like all those guys died for nothing. So you got to keep going. I think that's the sunk cost fallacy. Is what it's
Yeah,
called. I think that's what it
although
is with Biden.
I think that it's offset to some extent by the fact that when Obama made his phone calls to get everybody to line up behind Biden, they all now feel entitled to a reward. So there are plenty of people who also have an agenda to broker the convention and try to steal the nomination. Pretty much all of them feel like they deserve to win. Elizabeth Warren clearly feels that she deserves to win, even though she fell short. And I can't help but to imagine that people like Kamala Harris still look at the presidency as her birthright, and that she thinks the party might come calling.
Hey,
So,
it'll be somebody who won delegates. If they're smart, it'll be Klobuchar. I think Jacobin magazine was right about that one. If they're
uh,
smart,
well, you
Klobuchar.
just said the key words, if they're smart. And,
Yeah.
I mean, they're backing someone right now who has obvious dementia, and they're pinning their hopes on winning a general election, running a candidate who clearly has dementia, and their defense is, no, he doesn't. That's a Russian hoax, if you believe that. It's only Bernie Bros, Trump people, and Russians claiming that he has dementia. Don't believe your lying eyes. And then he's trying to
Well,
staff his whole cabinet with Wall Street people. So he's trying to return to the worst tendencies of Obama with none of the good ones. So there's no even promise of anything remotely progressive or positive about the Biden campaign.
and
Uh,
remember, if he had been president, we'd be in Syria right now, losing another war.
yeah. So I mean,
Um,
that's why I'm saying, like, look, if Biden's nominated, I am going to encourage everyone on the left, every Democrat I know, to vote third party.
yeah, well, that's gonna you're gonna have some fights, man,
Yeah, I
because
know, but
the fact that I already told some people that I don't want to is followed by this. The worst thing about Bernie people. Um, that's followed by. I mean, I can already see the shaming going on
oh
because
no,
these
I know
people
it's
aren't
gonna happen. I know that even my most of my former
like,
Bernie supporter friends are gonna be like, well, blue no matter who, sigh. I'm gonna be like, no, grow some balls. We got to boycott this. We got to kill the party, because the only usefulness of the Democratic Party is insofar as it can help promote leftist causes. Now that it has no interest in doing that and no ability to do that, I'm out. And anyone who is a leftist should also be out. There's no reason to support a party that's only marginally less shitty than the Republican Party. And by the way,
something.
any party that would empower Bloomberg and Jamie Dimon is no better than the Republicans on substantive issues. There's no
It is my
reason to vote
belief
for Biden.
that if Biden were to run and win, um, the Republicans are going to clean our clocks for the next 2 or 4 years. I know people. This thing about Democrats right now, though, they're obsessed with demographics, which makes sense. Identity politics is very much front and center for the party. They've tried to substitute economics with that. Um, they're obsessed demographics. They believe that demographically they are destined to win. But the problem with that theory is that one, it supposes that everybody still keeps voting the way that they do, which there's some evidence they won't, especially if your party's incompetent. Also, if you have a diverse coalition, it's a coalition that easily fractures, right? I mean,
Yeah.
look at Obama. One of the reasons he could win is he pulled in so much black support. Hillary Clinton did not, after the primaries at least. They just didn't show up for her. And who knows what will happen with Biden necessarily, but you have a fractured coalition, you have an incompetent party. I mean, if anything, the demographics have favored the Democrats for well over 10 years now, and they still can't get it done.
Yeah, it's
You
because they
know?
won't unify behind a message that does anything. There's no
I mean,
vision.
I think a Biden presidency, all the stuff that you're laying out right now, would be a disaster that we may not recover from. I'll tell you what it would be like as a historical thing. That there's this idea that you live in political systems, if you will, political time, as Skronik calls it, and it's the idea that you have a president who forges the kind of consensus of their era, along with the people with them. So, in let me use one. Franklin Roosevelt would be one of the ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then after that president, you have people like Harry Truman and John F. Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson, and they try to expand on what FDR did. In the meantime, the opposing party, the Republicans, are only able to get somebody in like Eisenhower, who in many ways makes peace with the New Deal. But then you have a president who fails, somebody like Johnson. The coalition starts to fracture. And then you get the last dying gasp of that coalition, which would be Jimmy Carter. Then the cycle repeats with Reagan. So a lot of political scientists think that Donald Trump is like the equivalent of Herbert Hoover, Jimmy Carter, James Buchanan, or Franklin Pierce, depending on how you feel about those two. And there's a lot of arguments to be made there.
Yeah.
You know, there's a good argument to be made there. However, there's one case where that system doesn't work. Post-Civil War, Abraham Lincoln founds the political system.
Right.
Andrew Johnson, although he was running mate, Andrew Johnson was a Democrat originally. He tried to govern as a Democrat, and that's why he got impeached. That's a large reason why. Then you get people like Grant in there who expands on what Lincoln wanted to do. But then the party starts to have problems, especially when you get to Benjamin Harrison, who became a deeply unpopular president in his time. And Grover Cleveland was swept in. And there's an argument that I would make, and I believe Mark Summers, who we knew back in University of Kentucky, the great historian of the Gilded Age, said something too, that Grover Cleveland had a chance to create a Democratic coalition. Such was his political failure that the Republicans could come back. And then McKinley and Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, that is, formed that new coalition that would last all the way until the 20s and 30s.
Right.
And there's a good chance that somebody like Joe Biden, in my opinion, would be like Grover Cleveland.
Yes, except probably much more of a failure and not someone who'd be looked back upon as someone who had promise.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And one other thing I mentioned about Grover Cleveland, too, I mean, there's no way he's going to have a candy bar named after his daughter. Okay?
Well, also, the thing about Grover Cleveland is, from what I understand of him, he at least had some vision and he tried to do something.
He did.
Whereas Joe Biden has no intention of trying to do anything. And he's even said that even if somehow the Democrats got a majority in Congress and passed Medicare for all, that if it was on his desk, he would veto it.
Great. That's wonderful. But you know what? You could have something where enough political pressure is applied to where he'd either sign the legislation or sign a watered-down version. Don't doubt the powers of political pressure at certain times. That said, my money would say, yeah, he'd veto the thing because,
Yeah.
we're talking about a guy who tax breaks his best friend. I mean, credit card stuff in Delaware and things? I mean, the guy's shady.
Yeah, he is. So the other scenario I was thinking is that maybe they do ride Biden for the election to use his, quote, electability and then jettison him, let's say, just slightly after 2 years of being president, and then try to get 10 years out of his VP. Because if you come into office and there's less than half a term left, and you can serve that out without it counting against your 2-term limit. So let's say he's running with Stacey Abrams. He somehow gets elected. We wait 2 years, and then he resigns right after that deadline, that marker. And then potentially you could have 10 years of someone like a Stacey Abrams. I wonder if that is actually the plan that some of the establishment people have.
Yeah, I think he might go with Abrams. That's a reasonable plan. But we'd have to see him, get in there first, which I want to mention that real quick. I was talking to Danny about it, my brother, and he said, mark my words, Joe Biden will lose. The House will go back to being Republican, or in his words, deep red. And don't come crying to him in November when it happens. My brother's dead certain. And I would like all the people listening out there to know that with very few exceptions, most of my brother's predictions go right because he looks at facts. He doesn't let who he likes get in the way of that. He is one of only three people I knew who, for months, said Donald J. Trump will become president of the United States.
Hmm.
And he never wavered from that when he told me that.
I remember another Danny prediction which turned out to be true right after the economic recovery when wages were still stagnant and job opportunities were still shit. I think I was there. He said, "Guys, this is the new normal,"
Yes.
and
Yes. He said,
so
he actually said
far
it
that has
was,
been spot on.
he told me, you know when he told me that? Before I'd even met you.
Oh, really?
That's summer 2009. I was having a conversation when he said, this is going to be the new normal. Um,
You think
what
Danny
can I say,
might be
man?
on the ESP spectrum or something?
The only thing he was sort of wrong about was Andrew Yang, but that was one of the only times where I saw like his his liking for somebody start to override his judgment about their chances.
I mean, I had a
You know,
couple friends like that here. One of my friends thought that Yang was massively overperforming his polls, and that when he decided to go heavy into Iowa, that he was going to shock the world. And I tried to tell him, dude, Iowa's not a Yang state. He's completely stupid to put any more resources in there. He should try for a different state with a more liberal bent to it. But
I will say this though, on one thing that Danny was right about Andrew Yang, and to only straight with it, my brother supported Andrew Yang very early in his campaign, like when he was essentially a nobody. He just looked at his platform, saw one interview with him, and said, "This is my guy." He was right at one thing. He said, "This man will perform better than the rest of these like John Delaney types and whatnot." You know,
although to be
he was
fair, that probably wasn't a very hard prediction to make. I mean, John Delaney is profoundly unlikable.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just mentioning Delaney because he's one of the biggest losers. But all those people like Jay Inslee and de Blasio, he was like, no, these guys, they're not going anywhere. He says Yang will stick around and he will have some impact. And he's right. But he did overestimate how well he would do in some things, you know.
Yeah,
But
we need to have Danny Damas on here sometime. Yeah, that should
yeah,
be
man.
that should be
Yeah,
his.
I could go a whole list of like stuff where he's like, no, Sean, this is what's going to happen with this or with that, you know. And so I do tend to listen to him about some of this stuff, you know. But anyway, so Biden has major issues, both his past, I mean, his ability to make speeches. I know that since Super Tuesday, they've reduced the number of speaking engagements he's had, so people really haven't been hearing from him very much.
Yeah,
That could play a part in the elections tonight, I'd think. You know, before we get into the states, though, I want to hear your opinion on what Sanders has done since Super Tuesday. And I'll be honest, I've been looking more into Warren and Biden and less into Sanders. But it appears to me I get a lot of emails from him, and I think right now he knows it's make or break tonight.
yeah. So I know he's been focusing heavily on Michigan. He has ramped up his attacks. He still won't go personal or talk about dementia. There are some people who think that he should go after Hunter Biden. I actually don't think he should because that's not Bernie's brand. I think it might
Also,
be more legitimate to go after Biden's brain than to go after his son. Um, but I'm trying to think like what Bernie could do, which wouldn't be not Bernie.
Can't
Um,
go after Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden is seen
yeah,
by Democrats right now as like a Benghazi situation, like a fake scandal. I won't get into the details of it. I don't have an opinion on it. I have not looked into it.
yeah.
I
Because I
just know
mean,
that
I guess if
Democrats.
Bernie does it, he has to tread cautiously though by saying essentially, look, I don't really know the truth of what his arrangement with Burisma was, but what I can tell you is that it has the appearance of corruption and it will undermine Joe Biden's message about cleaning up Trump's corruption. I don't have that kind of connection or sway. Hell, my own son ran for Congress 2 years ago, and I didn't even endorse him because I was afraid of having an overweening influence in a neighboring state. I wanted him to sink or swim on his own merits. Unlike Joe Biden, who got his son a $50,000 per month gig after he got dishonorably discharged from the army for doing crack. Well, I mean, he would obviously, Bernie would be way more polite about it, but um,
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd say considering the allegations, you're pretty polite yourself.
yeah,
I he could he doesn't like the personal stuff. He's and you know there's a whole set of people like Republicans I know who think the fact that Bernie never went personal with Hillary is one of the reasons why he lost.
Yeah, I guess too.
Uh,
There's always this difference. I've noticed the biggest difference between Democrats and Republicans, I think, is stylistic and temperamental. Republicans loved when Trump was, cracking skulls in the primary. If he had done that in a Democratic primary, I don't think he'd have gotten anywhere. I think people would have just thought of him as being a brute, and they would have cried about how mean he was and not voted for him.
yes, definitely. Oh, yes, definitely. It doesn't mean, of course, Democrats can't be mean. That's just not their particular brand of meanness.
Exactly. I mean, they don't go for that. I mean, you can be nasty, but you have to sort of have a plausible deniability about it, or frame it as concern trolling, or do it in a more passive aggressive manner. You can't
Yeah.
just go after somebody and say, I don't like this person, they're fat, and they're stupid. Whereas in the
Well, they
Republican
do that.
Party, you can easily do that, and there will be no
They do that one on
consequence.
Twitter, man. Like they'll they'll be like Rush Limbaugh's fat and dumb, and I'm like, well, these are two things that are true. Well, I don't know how dumb he is necessarily. He's been able to have the number one radio show for decades.
I mean, he's
Uh,
far from dumb. This man has made millions of dollars talking dumb shit on the air for decades. That's a hell of a career when you do as little work as Rush Limbaugh did.
I'll say one thing real quick about Rush, just since we bring him up. Um, yeah, I read part of his book years back. What was it? Oh, they had such stupid titles like "The Way Things Ought to Be."
Yes.
But the thing is, like, one of the not the chapters on policy. I was always, I'll go, that this is moronic. But when I got to the stuff where he talked about how Republicans should win elections and put themselves forward, I was very impressed. And then I thought something else too, because my dad listens to him, so I've heard him over the years. And Rush backed Ted Cruz as my dad did. Ted Cruz was very much like the Elizabeth Warren of that race in a way. He's trying to combine all the different features of conservatism. I mean, he had no blind spots as a conservative, really.
Yeah.
But Limbaugh did say, he said, the media is going to mock Trump in his base. Means he said they're going to be blindsided by him. This man's support goes deeper than they think. I remembered him saying that, and he wasn't saying, he actually was saying, like, there's a bunch of stuff I don't agree about Trump. He said, but don't, he said, take him seriously. And I've always thought when it comes to like electoral stuff, I'll actually listen to what Rush has to say. When it comes to tax policy, hell
Yeah.
no. But if he's talking
No.
about like how the nature of elections going, I'll listen to him. He's a shrewd guy when it comes to that.
Yeah, I
You
think
know?
he's got a pretty good feel for the Republican base, at least. Maybe not so much the Democratic base or the general electorate, but when it comes to the Republican base, I think he's pretty much spot on with his analysis.
Probably helps when they call you in on the phone. You know what I mean? Like they're ringing you up, so you get to hear directly from them. I mean,
Yeah, that's
I don't think
true.
I don't think Mitch McConnell's like wants to actually hear what the voters of Kentucky think or say. Just
I've always thought about how fun it might be to call into one of those right wing radio shows and pretend to be like some crazy ass conspiracy theorist and just come up with something completely off the wall to see how they react in live time.
here's one. Here's one for you. I think I heard it on Coast to Coast AM years back. No, Danny told me he heard this one. Werewolf soldiers that were going to be deployed to Vietnam. Go with that one.
Okay.
Or, oh, dude, really good one. Use the plot from Piranha. The plot for Piranha, shitty schlock movie, right? Is that we made like super deadly piranhas that we were going to put in the waters of Vietnam to devour like the VC.
Oh,
And
speaking
then,
of the plots of fictional things that have become randomly relevant, um, I just I just realized the Michael Bloomberg campaign was literally the plot of Urban Strike.
oh my God, you're right.
Yeah, I mean it's a
Oh,
media mogul who decides to use all his wealth, cash in his chips, and try to become president.
only no like giant laser cannon that
Well, that
hits
not that we know of.
large
I mean,
affecting glass.
well, that we know of.
No
Um,
awesome, levels in Hawaii and Mexico, and then you got to like blow stuff up in San Francisco. Great video game, by the way, to your people out there, Urban Strike. But you want to get into the states right now?
yeah. So, I was looking at polls yesterday, and I think you want to start out with Washington.
Sure thing. And I actually have the list up this time, so we
Okay.
won't like forget Maine,
Yeah,
so to
I
speak.
have my predictions written down by state this time.
Excellent,
So
man.
what I'm going to do is actually pull up a map of the elections going on today.
I have the 538 one up just so I can tell you what they
Okay.
say, okay?
All right. Yeah. Map. Damn it.
Okay. So the 538 one for Washington says that they predict Biden to win, that he has had a sudden burst in the polls in Washington.
Since
However, it would be
when?
they place it as a narrow win.
I actually feel a little more bullish on that one.
Yeah.
And the reason is that so coronavirus, Washington State's one of the few places that it has broken out.
Yeah.
Guess which area it's broken out in?
Battle?
Yes. And every area in Washington is fairly narrow in terms of the polling. It's usually, say, 47-44 favor one candidate or the other. The area that favors Biden the most is that exact area. So turnout will be down, especially for older people who are much more vulnerable to and therefore worried about coronavirus. So, because of that, I think that Bernie might actually have a slight edge in the state as a whole.
I generally agree with you. I think he'll have an edge in Washington. And, Washington's a much closer state he'll get credit for just because it's a large rural area. It's not like Oregon in the same way. Well, Oregon has a large rural area too, but you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, except
Like,
the difference between Washington and
Republican.
Oregon is that people actually live in Washington's rural area.
Very true. And it should be noted that, Republicans do have success in Washington sometimes.
Yeah,
Okay,
also
so
was impressed by these states in general, how homogenous they are politically, at least when it comes to the Democratic electorate, and how almost every area in almost all of these states except for Michigan, very consistent results place to place.
yeah.
So
So,
next state, Idaho.
oh, Idaho. Let's go to that
All right,
one.
so the
Um,
polls last time I checked say 47-44 Biden.
That is the same thing here. It says that Biden has a slight edge over Sanders. Once again, post Super Tuesday bump.
And this is one I'm not actually worried about because there are only 20 delegates at play. Back in 2016, fun fact, Bernie won 80% of the vote. So guess how many delegates he got for his 80% of the vote out of that 20?
I don't know, man. Well, how many?
13. So he
All
got
right.
so he got maybe what, 65% of the delegates winning 80% of the vote? So basically what I'm saying is if that proportion holds true, he can still take an L and get half the delegates. So who gives a shit?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's only 20 delegates, but you want to win states.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
you do.
delegates are
You want to put your
important.
colors on the map as much as possible, even if it's the most narrow victory conceivable. Um,
Idaho, you say you're worried about. I don't know enough about it. I know that he won 80. I know he won it significantly last time. I think he'll get Idaho as well.
okay.
But once again, this is going to be a much more narrow race, which you can't afford in a way. I mean,
Yeah.
Biden's not ahead of him in delegates by too much, but enough to where you need more than a narrow win. You
Right. And
know?
I think either way it will be a narrow win. I don't see anybody running away with Idaho. Um, the people there will are pretty evenly split.
All right,
Next
what's
up
next?
is North Dakota. And this one, the polls, last time I checked, 48-41 in favor of Joe Biden.
Same thing with 538, of course. Here's the one for this though. They show him with a significant bump in North Dakota. Um, don't know enough about North Dakota. One of the only American states I've never visited. My thought is that Biden will lock it in, though.
Yeah, I've been to North Dakota technically when my family was driving up to Alaska when I was a kid. Uh, it is kind of. There's not much there. Let's put it that way.
Well, apparently the movie Leprechaun is set there. I just found this out because the girlfriend decided to watch it. By the way, people don't watch that movie.
Leprechaun, huh?
Yeah, Leprechaun. It's set in North Dakota. I thought I was like, wow, a movie set in North Dakota. I never see this.
Well, I mean, I remember South Dakota much better than I do North Dakota. South Dakota is basically if you took the terrain of the moon and added grass.
Cool.
I mean,
South Dakota also, I mean, it's got Mount Rushmore. You got Deadwood, the Badlands.
yeah, the Badlands, I don't know what the appeal of the Badlands is. I know some people say that it has a rugged beauty. I thought it was absolutely hideous.
Black Hills. The Black Hills is what I meant to say. Sorry.
Yeah.
The Badlands kind of go into North Dakota too. But once again, not an expert. I think it'll be Biden there as well. And it looks like it was close for a minute. Sanders even led for a bit, but the support doesn't seem to be there.
I tend to agree.
What's our next?
For context about North Dakota, two things. One, 2016, Bernie won 64% of the vote. And even with that clear victory, he was only able to get 8 out of 14 delegates. Second point, the way that North Dakota operates is worth noting. It's called a firehouse caucus. None of them are actually held in firehouses, but there are only 14 locations around the state, and they're only open 8 hours from noon to 8. You can go to any one of them across the states as a North Dakota resident, and you only have to go there and submit your vote and leave. So it's not like other caucuses where you stay around and do realignment and all that stuff. So one of the more bizarre caucus systems that I can imagine. And given how vast and more or less thinly populated North Dakota is, I think this might be the most unwise system I've ever heard of.
Yeah, my God, that is bad. Fuck.
Yeah, it's I just had to bring that up because I don't understand what the hell they were thinking with that. I mean, this is kind of like that werewolf movie where, they have 30 minutes of square dancing in the movie. And
Oh, Howling 7.
yeah, Howling
Terrible.
7.
That actually is the worst movie I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of movies. Seen a lot of bad movies, but that might be no. That's this. This is the worst movie I've ever seen.
Yeah,
Danny agrees. By the way, he watched it for his bad movie marathon.
Yeah.
And he also decreed it the worst movie he's ever seen.
Worse than the Starfighters.
Yeah, worse than the Starfighters. These Starfighters, you get some cool
aerial refueling scenes.
I mean, it's got some historical value. You get to see real jets in the '60s.
Well, it's basically a big commercial for the F-104 Starfighter, which, by the way, was a total piece of shit. Just like a lot of things the U.S. government bought in the '60s, it was a single-purpose aircraft which was not survivable at all. It had very little stability, no maneuverability, and then they show it doing bombing missions. If you had to bomb something in an F-104, your best chance would be to nosedive the plane into something, because that thing was not designed to attack anything on the ground. It doesn't even fly well at low altitude. It's an interceptor, and that's all it was meant to do. But this film was very misleading. It was literally propaganda.
Oh, yeah.
And propaganda by Lockheed or whatever company made the F-104.
What's our next state?
Our next state is Mississippi, and I think there's going to be, a lot of waiting on the results of that one. I mean, that one's going to be so close. No, it's not.
Yeah, we're all going to be, seat of, you'll be on the edge of your toilet seat,
Yeah, my prediction, Bernie gets about 25%. Biden gets the remainder.
Yeah, something like that. Mississippi it's Biden country. We all know it. Let's move on to something more interesting.
All right, Missouri. So this one, from the predictions that I've seen, Biden wins, but Bernie gets a respectable delegate haul because he makes the threshold in every district, but still pretty clear win for Biden.
Clear win for Biden. Not as big a win as, say, Mississippi, but pretty clear win for Joe Biden. I've always thought he'd take Missouri.
Yeah, I mean, I could see Bernie maybe slightly outperforming the polls in Missouri, but I can't see him winning.
He's not going to win. He was never going to win Missouri, in my opinion.
And then the big daddy of tonight.
Democrats abroad.
Oh, yeah, well, Michigan. All Democrats abroad is up tonight?
Yeah, I was wrong. Last time I thought it was because I'd seen, I guess maybe...
you're thinking about American Samoa.
Yeah, I was thinking about American Samoa, but, Democrats abroad, they just...
Smashing victory for Bernie Sanders.
They put Biden as winning, but only recent bump. I'm with you. I think it'll be Sanders.
No, I mean, because the people who live abroad, Americans who live abroad, tend to be pretty much the most liberal group of Americans, period. If Biden wins that, I'm going to have to suspect fraud.
I can see that. Um, I would suspect the same thing. But yeah, Democrats abroad got that one. But one that's make or break, because this is the state that essentially allowed Sanders to keep going in 2016.
Yeah,
And I will
Michigan.
say, one of my better predictions ever was I predicted him to win Michigan in 2016.
I remember that because I thought you were nuts.
Well, my prediction was based on two things. One, Hillary was there were two things that I saw working to Bernie's favor in Michigan. You have a large, growing Muslim community there. A person like Hillary Clinton, not too popular, especially the Iraq War vote and some other things in her career. And the Sanders appeal to economics would work there. And there's a significant number of people in Michigan who just hate anybody with the name Clinton
Yeah,
for very good reason. And it was a very narrow win for Bernie, but it was still one of the biggest upsets of any primary. I mean, really remember
yeah.
social media more than you'd see for any random primary race really exploding with people.
Wasn't there a
Uh,
30-point difference between his polls and the results?
I don't think it was that drastic, but it was pretty off. I think it was at least 10. You know, uh, it was a shocker. So you got to ask yourself, do those things play to Bernie's benefit this time enough for a narrow win? That's the thing. Keep in mind. Yes, he won Michigan last time. It was very narrow. It's still an
Yeah,
upset.
I mean, I
Very
guess
narrow.
I still think he'll edge it out. The reason being trade issues, and then Biden's recent decision to, well, I guess somebody leaked it. All these ideas about Wall Street appointments to his cabinet. So I think those two things will be enough to make up the 6 or so point gap in the polls, or at the very minimum, it will be airtight as a race. It'll be a long night waiting for those results.
I see it as a narrow Biden win, which plays into what I think is really hurting Sanders right now. Um, he does of course have a very strong block of support, but so much of what he was able to do in 2016 was people just didn't like Hillary.
Yeah,
You know, um, and he just doesn't have that with Biden. And I mean, Biden's favorability ratings have gone down over the last few months. He's having these other problems, but they still remain high and definitely higher than Hillary Clinton's were.
I can just see him
So,
going to Flint, Michigan, like, "Hey, I was Obama's VP. I'm running for, the thing."
oh, Flint, don't they don't have clean water there, right?
They do not. And you know what's really
Great,
absolutely
fantastic.
mind-boggling about Flint? So the reason they have this crisis is that Governor Snyder demanded that they switch to a private water source, and he could easily fix the Flint water crisis by allowing them to go back to the public system, which still exists. The pipelines are still there. Apparently, the water is safe and lead free. But because he's an ideologue, he will not allow them to go back to a system that is not poisoned. And it baffles the mind that Obama didn't go there and pressure him. Rick, listen, you need to stop being a dick. Or I will, declare martial law. Because this is,
Well, I
fucking
mean,
stupid and unnecessary.
it'd be these. It's the same reason we don't have any support systems for the homeless. Those in
Yeah.
power don't care.
And that's why, speaking of the betrayals and disappointments of the Obama years, that's exactly why I will never vote for another neoliberal Democrat or another corporatist or centrist or moderate or whatever the hell they want to call themselves. No chance of that ever happening.
Yeah, the Flint one was very big, um, but very very demoralizing moment there. Still don't have clean water.
Yeah, so I
So
guess this term that Biden likes to bandy about, the Obama-Biden Democrat, it's somebody who would veto Medicare for all, but wouldn't do a damn thing to help a community that is being poisoned by lead, when the solution is extraordinarily simple and practically fucking free.
well, sir, I do want to say that some of the problems that Sanders is running into is that he's not running against Hillary.
Yeah, I mean, that's true.
Not running against Hillary, and Find the right words for this one. It's like looking at like the number of like the moderate lane was clogged and then it was unclogged, like we said. So for instance, like I said, if Marco Rubio dropped out before Super Tuesday, Trump loses. But Rubio's there, and that clogs up the lane just enough for Trump to win big on Super Tuesday and make it all but inevitable for him. And we don't have the moderate lane clogged up, but that's the one I was trying to think of. A while back, I was listening to Bill Maher talk about something because he was all about Amy Klobuchar, and he said something interesting. And some people don't like him, but I think he's funny sometimes. More importantly, I want to hear what a Democrat like he has to say. Just what are you thinking? And especially one who's willing to be upfront about it. And he said, like, look, these far left people like Sanders, Warren types, he says they don't matter. The Democrats won in 2018 by peeling off suburban voters, moderate to liberal Republicans. He says all you need to do is put a moderate up there, and your Warren, Bernie people will just fall in line.
Yeah, well, I think
And
he's going to be in for a rude awakening.
the people, man, I just saying, I know people who are of that mindset, and that is the way that they view it. The Democrats' success in the last few years has not been because of Bernie Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez. That the real story of 2018 was the number of moderates who got in there. And on another level, for people like me who have a problem with the current iteration of identity politics, seeing it more as divisive than anything else, or at least not very good at politically forming a coalition, if you think about it, a lot of the Democrats who also got elected, you might have somebody who would be, say, transgender, gay, but a lot of them didn't play it up nearly that hard. A lot of them emphasized, hey, I'm going to try to do policies that'll help you. The
Yeah.
ones who played up the identity politics, like Abrams, she lost. Narrow loss, but still a loss. And there's a whole other thing that says that the kind of people who the Democrats had more success with in 2018 didn't get the headlines, though. And that's like the, if you will, the story that's going on underneath the surface that we don't see.
Well, that and the other big narrative that came out of 2018 is like all of these CIA and military veterans who got elected as moderates, the badass caucus.
Yeah.
And most of them, and the reason I know that they're not like combat veterans, so therefore the badass label seems a bit of a stretch, is because most of them are female. And the military, up until recently, has not allowed women in combat. So most of these people were looking at satellite photos, not actually fighting.
Truth be told, I mean, I think the last war where most of the people in your army were actually the front line shooting at each other was World War One. I mean, since World War Two, in the rear at the gear is important. The logistics of war
Oh,
being
it
so
is.
crazy now.
But I
Yeah.
just find it interesting that they call themselves the badasses because I don't think that there's anything more inherently badass about any of them than anyone else.
Probably right. Yeah, nothing more
I mean,
badass than the
and I
satellite
say
photo.
this, I mean, my dad was in the army for 20 years. I don't think he's really a badass.
He
Now,
was
you had to have a
logistics.
certain amount of toughness to last as long as he did.
Yeah.
But a lot of the toughness that comes with being a career soldier is just having your knees and back hold up long enough to make retirement because of PT and other things. But you could apply it to almost any physical job. That's not something that is inherent to the military or unique to the military.
He made colonel, didn't he?
He made lieutenant colonel.
Lieutenant colonel.
Some general he knew told him, if you stay in, I can get you full bird colonel. But this is right when the Iraq War is breaking out. And my dad hadn't been deployed yet, and he also didn't get deployed to Gulf War One. So he's like, you know what? Fuck it, I'm done. I'm getting too old for this shit, and I'm gonna cash in. So now he teaches JRTC, and
Okay.
you know, safe and
My
sound.
my grandpa was. I had two grandpas in World War II. One was a military police. He got shot at once or twice. And my other grandpa was a CB in the Pacific. I don't know what happened to him, but the island he landed on was one of the Admiralty Islands, and there wasn't as much fighting there. So I suspect he didn't see any combat, really. Or maybe if he did, it was very light. Nothing. That doesn't mean it wasn't hard. Actually, I looked at his medical records, and he got really sick in the Pacific, and they had to send him to San Francisco to recover. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, Do you have any closing thoughts you have? Because I'll be having to do having to go to work in a few minutes. But I've pretty much said everything that I've got. You got anything, man?
Um, I'm curious to see the results of Washington and Michigan. Depending on whether Bernie edges those out or not, it will have a major impact going forward. If he manages to win them, then I can see a comeback in the works, and then I think that makes my brokered convention scenario more likely. If Biden overperforms tonight and blows Bernie out of the water, I'm not sure where Bernie goes from there. I could also see Warren then choosing to jump on the Biden bandwagon. Um, I don't know, but I guess we'll have to see what happens tonight before we can really say anything about what will happen after that. What are your thoughts?
Well, but Bernie has to win Washington, and he definitely has to win Michigan because his win in 2016, people still remember that. It's gonna be a big part of the narrative. He's got to
Yeah,
win Michigan. Probably should definitely win Washington. Idaho would be very good as well, just for the story. If he can do
yeah.
those,
He's got to put that
and then
color on the
turn
map.
in put the color on the map, and then turn in a really good debate performance, and Biden turns in a terrible one, which you have a point there. That could definitely happen. Then Sanders is a way forward. But I will say this: if he gets nuked tonight, if Biden support is that strong, if they're not resting their laurels, because what I'd be afraid of is Biden is people taking that inevitability thing like Democrats always seem to do, which must be added. Sanders after Nevada, maybe he went the same way into Super Tuesday. I mean, youth turnout was low, and
Yeah.
that really broke his back. And who knows? Maybe they've woken up, and a bunch of them will show up at the polls today. Um, but if Biden has a blowout night, I think Bernie Sanders should pull out. And the reason is because if he keeps going, he'll only look spiteful and bad at this point. I mean, the Hillary thing looked kind of bad in 2016 for a lot of people, but I knew what Sanders was doing. He was trying to tell Hillary, hey, I know you're going to win this, but I want you to know there's a lot of people who like my ideas, and I want to go to the convention to be able to get certain things on that platform. So it made perfect sense. This time, it doesn't. If you get blown out in Michigan and Washington, it's over. It's done. Just turn it in. That's the best you can do at that point.
Yeah, and if the campaign ends tonight, then on the left, we need to refocus our efforts into boycotting the Democratic Party. Because at that point, if Biden gets nominated and he picks a cabinet that includes people like Jamie Dimon, well, there's nothing left for us in the Democratic Party. It's time to man the lifeboats and get the hell out.
It's very possible the Democratic Party uh, could collapse during a Biden presidency. We'd have to see him get elected. If
Yeah.
Danny's any indication, in his words, Trump's going to clean his clock. And I leave you with one very final thought from Danny. The reason he says this, he wanted me to tell you this, was that he believes that 2016 we only got half Trump. Like Trump didn't really think he was going to win, so he's just kind of doddering along. Like he'd land some punches, but for the most part, he's like, who knows, right? Then he wins.
Right.
And so Danny thinks that now Trump believes he's going to win. He's confident in it, and he knows that he has to win because presidents who have one term and then lose their reelection get forgotten and seen as losers inherently, at least in his mind, for sure, right?
Yeah.
So Danny thinks that we are about to get full attack dog Trump,
Hmm.
more so than 2016. That is his big contention.
Yeah,
That's
the
one of the
only
reasons.
the only caveat I would make to that is that Trump's handling of the coronavirus outbreak and then handling of what looks like an economic downturn that's beginning right now, those could even put a senile Biden into the White House. Although the problem with having Biden in the White House dealing with those things is that he's not going to do much better. So
If there's an
yeah,
economic
it could still kill the
downturn,
Democratic Party.
sorry, if there's an economic downturn and Trump doesn't handle it properly, which I doubt he will, then yeah, it doesn't matter. The Democrats could nominate a penguin, and the penguin would win.
Yeah,
I mean,
because Trump's approval ratings have rarely exceeded 43%. Then again, they've rarely sunk below that, too. I mean, he's got a very steady support base.
he has the most consistent approval rating in the history of since they've been doing this stuff.
Yeah, so I guess
But if
Trump's not only polarizing, he's very consistently polarizing in exactly the same way.
if you do not have a severe economic downturn, if the coronavirus turns out to be a paper tiger, if you will,
Yeah.
and it's Biden, then I go with Danny. I
No, I
think
agree.
Trump will.
I think, barring some display of undeniable ineptness in the management of American affairs, Trump will be reelected against a Biden. Um, Given a major crisis, like say if that Iran crisis had turned into a war, in that case, by anybody the Democrats nominated would be a shoe in. I mean, it'd be like 2008 running in the aftermath of Bush. The Democrats could have literally nominated any of the nobodies who were trying to run that year.
And
Even
that's
John
something
Edwards.
I do want to say. That's something I want to, since you bring that up, I want to make that quick point there. A lot of people I know are already confident that Trump is going to lose. I know many Democrats like that, and diverse Democrats too, like, people who are far left, people who are moderate. Um, and the reason is because they'll mention Bush, and I hate to tell them that yes, Trump's a bad president, but he has not failed the way Bush failed.
Right. No, I agree. Speaking of the Bush thing, I also think it's worth pointing out to Trump people that in terms of policy, Bush and Trump are not very different.
In a lot of ways, no.
The
In a
one
lot
major
of ways,
difference is that Trump talks more about trade issues in a way that is favorable to the working class, but what does he actually do in terms of his action? Well, he imposes a few tariffs here and there, but nothing on a systemic level. Aside from that, Bush and Trump are pretty damn hard to separate policy wise.
well, I mean, I'll only give Trump two things over Bush because I contend that Bush is the worst president of my lifetime and easily one of the three worst ever. I think the only president that's definitely worse is James Buchanan, and that's
Yeah,
because the Civil War happened. um,
right.
but the failure, the two things that I will say that Trump has over Bush is I am more positively disposed towards his trade policy. Not perfect, but much better than what people have been doing before him. But that's a whole different story. The other one, too, is that while he's not some foreign policy wizard by any stretch, he also has not gotten us involved in a pointless war that simply bleeds us dry of money and prestige.
Yeah,
You
although he
know,
came pretty close with Iran a couple months ago.
did not. Countries choose to go to war, and as somebody who studied that, they didn't. You could tell that neither one of those countries wanted to. They'd simply shoot at each other, kill a few people, and then that'd be it. Those kind of scuffles between countries are commonplace and relatively normal. Iran and America were not prepared to go to war. All they wanted to do is to show, hey, look, we have weapons, we can kill people, take us seriously enough. But neither one of those countries won a war. So I do not predict one will happen.
Well, I know Iran didn't want one, but with Trump, there's a little bit of
No,
erratic
no.
behavior. Not to mention that he always surrounds himself with the biggest neocon advisors he can find.
And he fires them.
Yeah, and then he fires them and replaces them with other neocons. So,
This thing, though, is like Trump and Obama, to their credit, while they will do bad things in foreign policy, like, people talk about Obama great in foreign policy. He had a lot of mistakes, too. Like, every president's going to make some mistakes. Or to put another way, one president might be successful with one country and then fail with another. That's common. That's normal. Um, what I'm saying is that neither Obama nor Trump, at the end of the day, want to actually do a war, and that's because both of these guys have spent a lot of their careers before they were president criticizing the Iraq War, seeing it as wasteful and stupid. I mean, in my opinion, one of the finest things Obama did was not going to Syria when literally everybody told him to do it. And like I said, if he did, we'd be there right now, losing another war.
yep.
And so but all that said, the thing about Trump is that while he is a bad president, it must also be kept in mind that to a lot of other people, especially Republicans, but even some moderates I know, the one thing they don't like is that Democrats say the sky is falling with Trump when it hasn't. That doesn't mean he's a good president. His tax policy is awful. He's bad for the environment. But he hasn't been the full tilt disaster we were told he was going to be. He could still be, of course, and especially if he gets a second term. Historically, presidents' second terms are typically pretty rough, all the way back to George Washington. George Washington's second term was not a pretty sight. I mean, you had the Jay Treaty. You started to have riots. You had the Whiskey Rebellion. Yeah, you had the Whiskey Rebellion. So
Yeah, what is it? The old cliche is during his first term, Washington showed the world how to be president. During his second term, he showed everybody how not to be president.
yeah, but he's not alone. George Washington. I'm sorry, not George. We already said George Washington. Sorry, Thomas Jefferson had a terrible second term. Jackson had a pretty dicey one. James Madison's second term, that was a disaster. That's the War of 1812. The White House gets burned down. You
Yeah.
know, he gets so presidents. So this Grant's second term, absolute disaster. Um, there's a whole precedent where your second term is terrible. FDR's second term was terrible. So yeah, if Trump gets reelected, and if I was a Republican, I wouldn't, and I knew my history, I wouldn't exactly be that excited either.
Yeah, speaking of presidents, are you familiar with those tier ranking things that you can find online?
Oh, what's that?
Okay, so there's a thing where you can rank presidents and other people or categories by tiers from S all the way down to F, based on how effective they were, or good, or whatever. Sometime we need to do a presidential ranking tier, like as a
Yeah, sure.
live stream or whatever. That could be fun. Or I think there
There's
might be one for Civil War generals, even. That might be something up your alley, too.
Yeah, well, I know them in a bit more detail. I've got pretty good knowledge on every presidential administration, but there's a few that I don't know enough about.
Let me
Like
guess,
president.
second half 19th century,
I'm actually not too
or
bad
first
because of
half
the
19th century.
Summers classes. Benjamin
Oh,
Harris, I'm actually pretty good on.
oh
He
yeah.
actually got a lot more done than people give him credit for. I'm not saying it was all good stuff. I'm just saying that Benjamin Harrison defies the stereotype of a Gilded Age president who can't get anything done. He passed a lot of legislation that nobody liked.
Well,
But anyway, I'll have to be going and getting ready for work. Uh,
okay.
Thanks for having me on here. Hope everybody else enjoyed it as well.
All right. Well, thank you for being on, and I guess we will all see what happens tonight. So until next time, I'm Thersites the Historian. Peace out.